Somewhere beneath a freeway overpass in San Diego lies a mastodon skeleton that was smashed apart by human hands 130,000 years ago. That is not a misprint. That is 115,000 years before anyone is supposed to have set foot in the Americas. No human bones were recovered, no DNA. Whoever broke those bones left behind 5 stones, a pattern of fractures that matches deliberate marrow extraction, and nothing else. I first came across the Cerutti Mastodon site while researching Clovis migrations, and I genuinely could not reconcile the date. What ancient DNA has since revealed about the first Americans is not a correction to the timeline. It is a record of populations arriving, surviving, and vanishing so completely that their genetics disappeared from the continent entirely. Start with the simplest version of the problem. Every major textbook tells roughly the same story. Sometime between 15,000 and 20,000 years ago, a population crossed the Bering land bridge from Siberia into Alaska, and eventually gave rise to every indigenous population on 2 continents. For most of the 20th century, the earliest accepted date was even younger. The Clovis culture placed the first Americans at roughly 13,000 years ago. Then in 1992, paleontologist Richard Cerutti flagged something unusual during highway construction near San Diego. Mastodon bones, arranged strangely, large cobblestones sitting among them in fine-grained sediment where they did not belong. Over the next 5 months, Cerutti and Thomas Demir of the San Diego Natural History Museum excavated the site. What they found were the limb bones of a juvenile mastodon, spiral fractured while fresh, clustered around 5 cobblestones bearing impact marks. In 2014, USGS geologist James Paces dated the bones using uranium-thorium methods. The result was 130,700 years old. The team published the findings in Nature. In 2017, Stephen Holen, lead co-author, said he knew of no natural process that could produce the fracture patterns. Michael Waters of Texas, A&M, countered that nothing at the site clearly qualified as a stone tool. The Bering Land Bridge was underwater 130,000 years ago. No human remains existed at the site, no DNA. The date was not a revision. It was an impossibility that refused to resolve. Then the footprints appeared, and the timeline cracked open from a completely different direction. In 2019, researchers excavated fossilized footprints along the dried shores of an ancient lake in White Sands National Park, New Mexico. When USGS researchers Jeff Pagati and Kathleen Springer radiocarbon dated seeds embedded in the sediment, the footprints came back between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. The scientific community pushed back, arguing the seeds came from an aquatic plant that absorbs carbon from water rather than air, which could potentially inflate the dates. Pagati and Springer returned. In 2023, they used 2 independent methods: radiocarbon dating of conifer pollen and luminescence dating of quartz grains. Both confirmed the original range. In 2025, University of Arizona archaeologist Vance Holliday dated mud cores from the site at 2 independent laboratories. The results were 20,700 to 22,400 years old, 3 different materials, multiple laboratories, 55 consistent radiocarbon dates. Holliday, who has studied the peopling of the Americas for nearly 50 years, put it simply: it would be an extraordinary coincidence for all these dates to give a consistent picture that was in error. Here's the detail that stopped me. Those footprints were made during the last glacial maximum. People walked alongside mammoths and giant ground sloths for at least 2,000 years. They left no tools, no burials, no genetic trace in any living population. But then geneticists found something stranger: a ghost written into the DNA of people still alive today. In 2015, Pontus Skoglund in David Reich's laboratory at Harvard noticed something that should not have been there. 3 Amazonian groups, the Serui, Caritiana, and Chavante, showed a genetic affinity not to East Asians or Siberians, but to indigenous Australians, New Guineans, and Andaman Islanders. Skoglund and Reich scrutinized 30 Native American groups against 197 populations worldwide. The signal held across 4 independent statistical methods. They named the vanished ancestor group Population Y, after Ipiquera, the Tupi word for ancestor. Roughly 2% of modern Amazonian ancestry traces to this lineage. It does not appear anywhere else in the Americas. It is absent from the 12,600-year-old Clovis associated Anzic 1 genome. Skoglund described it plainly. They had done extensive sampling in East Asia, and nobody looked like this. It was an unknown group that did not exist anymore. In 2021, geneticist Tabita Hunemeyer at the University of Sao Paulo found the Y signal in Pacific coastal Peruvian populations as well, suggesting the ancestry entered through a coastal route before the Amazonian branch diverged, a founding population that contributed measurably to living people. That itself vanished entirely. Pull back from the genetic detail for a moment and consider what it actually means. 3 layers of disappearance, stacked across more than 100,000 years. 130,000 years ago, someone breaks apart a mastodon in suburban San Diego. They leave 5 stones and nothing else. No remains, no descendants. 23,000 years ago, people walk beside mammoths in New Mexico. They leave footprints so vivid that individual toes are visible. They leave no traceable DNA in any modern population. And sometime before 15,000 years ago, a founding group carrying Australasian-related ancestry enters the Americas. Their population vanishes. Their genetic contribution survives only as a 2% signal in Amazonian groups isolated enough to preserve what everywhere else was overwritten. This is not Atlantis. The Cerutti site shows crude marrow extraction, not advanced technology. The real answer is stranger than any fringe theory. The Americas were not settled once. They were settled, erased, settled again, and erased again. What the combined evidence reveals is not a migration story. It is a record of repeated arrival and almost total biological erasure. Here's the thing that stays with me. The people who walked at White Sands survived the coldest period on Earth for at least 2,000 years. They raised children. They hunted alongside megafauna. And their entire biological legacy was erased so completely that we know them only from the shape of their feet pressed into mud. Population Y exists as a 2% ghost in Amazonian genomes. Whatever hominin smashed apart, that mastodon left behind 5 cobblestones and vanished from the genetic record of the planet. When you look at those footprints in the gypsum flats of White Sands, you are looking at the evidence of people whose DNA the continent no longer carries. That is not a metaphor. That is what the genetics confirmed by failing to find them. Still walking, already gone.